Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with a daily dose of doom and gloom, your meta-analysis of all things SHTF. Guys, I really don't know how much time we have left. I really don't. I mean, in the upcoming week ahead, we very well may see the outbreak of a civil war, a world war, and the collapse of the global financial system. Okay, by Tuesday. Who knows what's going to happen after that? Because NATO is planning on committing 300,000 troops near the Russian border. They're putting offensive military equipment near the Russian border 1 week after calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal. How bad do you seriously think this is going to get? Okay, all of the banks are insolvent. We're on the brink of a global reset, and now they're getting ready to start a frickin' civil war. What you're seeing behind me, this procession of military equipment, there's a convoy of Humvees escorting what appears to be fissionable nuclear material being transported through the town of Grand Forks, I believe, Montana. Now, I show you this because this is actually quite frequent in that neck of the woods. These types of things are commonly seen by people when they transport nuclear weapons. But understand that you are going to see a lot more military vehicles in 2023 on the roads, whether it's because of wars that are getting ready to be waged across the pond or the war that will be waged on us here. Because when there's a war over there, there's got to be martial law over here. We're going to talk about how that crackdown is actually going to look here. But don't be surprised if you see something like this rolling through a neighborhood near you in the not so distant future. Guys, it is getting absolutely insane. We are totally approaching the 0 hour. Every single day that goes by, I just get more and more data that validates for me that this situation is wildly out of control. We have NATO talking about sending 300,000 troops to the Russian border as a fixing maneuver, okay, to try to hold the Russians in place so they have to split up their forces. They can't commit as much to Bakhmut and the rest of the Ukrainian conflict, thus giving up the initiative to the Ukrainians so that they can get the Russians on the back foot, possibly push them out. Of course, the Russians have said, if we get pushed out, that's when we start pushing the nuclear button. Of course, NATO has said, if Ukraine falls, we're going to enter Ukraine. In fact, that's exactly what a Polish diplomat said on French TV. That exact thing, that if Kiev falls, we will go into Ukraine. And you know what's going to happen there. The Russians are going to engage the Poles. Understand what's happening right now. The Poles have HIMARS systems near Kaliningrad. These are offensive systems. These are not missile defense. These are for offensive purposes. And don't think that the Russians don't know it. In the last week, when many people were sleeping, there were so many close brush-ins with the German Air Force, the Russian Air Force, the US Air Force. Of course, we had the first encounter of a drone and Russian Air Force happening over the Black Sea. But these things are becoming very, very common. And we're not just talking about planes. We're talking about nuclear-capable bombers coming into close contact more and more frequently as these forces encroach on Russia's border. And of course, if the ratification of the two countries into NATO is finally put into place and set in motion by Turkey, I think they're the last ones to sign on, then I really don't know how much time we're going to have left, because things are going to get really, really testy at that point with the Russians. You got Vladimir Putin right now considered a war criminal. That is incredibly deadly serious. Now all of these countries, 123 countries, are obligated to extradite him to be prosecuted for war crimes to The Hague. And Germany today came out and said, yes, in fact, we will arrest Vladimir Putin if he comes to our country. Understand where that puts us. That absolutely guarantees, and I'm sorry if I repeated myself a little bit, but it bears repeating how significant of a move that is. That means that we're past the point of no return. It's just a matter of really when is all the dominoes going to start to fall. Now, I got to ask myself, this whole Trump arrest thing, that I think they might have walked it back. I don't know. Trump might have walked it back and said, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to be arrested on Tuesday. I'm not even that up to speed on that. I do find it quite odd that at the same time that Trump is let back on social media, suddenly he's predicting his own arrest, which would clearly result in massive civil disorder. And everybody knows it. Now, if I'm looking at the banking system, which is totally insolvent, it doesn't matter if it's 100 little banks all getting swallowed up by the big banks. The banks are bankrupt, okay? The system is kaput, okay? This is a great time to be into the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because that's all you're going to be hearing in the markets in 2023. But understand that this is a great distraction away from that. And I'm not one of these people that says this is a distraction from that. I don't know what's a distraction from what anymore. Is the war a distraction from the banking system? Is the banking distraction system a distraction from the political divide in the United States? Is the political divide a distraction from the war that's escalating? Who knows? It's a lot of stuff going on, and it appears everything's a distraction from everything else. All you need to understand is that all of these things are intersecting and converging into a massive SHTF storm that I think everybody is going to be invited to, regardless of whether or not you want to. It doesn't matter how far into the woods you bug out. It's likely going to reach out and touch you just a little bit too, because the White House has said no ceasefire. Chinese brokered ceasefire deal, it's not happening. John Kirby came out today and said at a press conference that we will not honor any sort of Chinese brokered peace deal. Of course, China went to Russia today to see Vladimir Putin, and you know exactly what's up. In fact, the White House is spooked because they're concerned that the Russians and the Chinese are engaged in far more strategic cooperation than originally thought, along the lines of providing them with nuclear material. Moscow still on the highest alert. They got air defense systems being deployed. I talked about that a couple days ago. I showed you guys some pictures. I'm going to take you around the map once again today. We have an emergency message that's going to be sent out in the UK. Now, we've had these emergency alert systems here in Canada for a long time. When an emergency happens, whether it's a perpetrator who's on the loose or, some sort of storm or something like that, everybody's phone goes off at the same time. It sounds an alarm. It's the new air raid siren. They're rolling this out in the UK. They're rolling it out. They're using the excuse of, well, this is for weather emergencies and this, that, and whatever. This is the new air raid siren, and they're getting people ready. In fact, we talked about this about a month ago. It was slightly delayed, but now they're actually going to be doing it. So save the date, April 23rd. If you live in the UK, get ready, because your phone's going to go off, and it's likely going to freak out half the population because they're going to think that the bombs are inbound. That's what this is all about. I told you guys the other day that in China, in places that are proximate to the Taiwan Strait, they have apps on their phones that show them where the nearest bomb shelter is, okay? It's coming. Dissent crackdown is coming. In Canada, we have to contest with Bill C-11. That's another story altogether, but Tucker Carlson did a little brief piece on the possibility for crackdowns and dissent coming as a result of the war that's going on. Russia cracking down on any dissent as it pertains to the special military operation. You got Taiwan cracking down on what they're calling fake news about the upcoming war with China. Belarus just put a new law into place that has capital punishment and much more harsher punishments for anybody accused of treason as they try to quell some Ukrainian sabotage attempts that have been going on within that country. I briefly spoke the other day about how some Russian saboteurs, spy network, was detected in Poland, and apparently they were trying to survey train tracks there. Yes, train tracks. Where has there been a lot of train track derailment activity lately? Oh yeah, it was the United States, wasn't it? Now, I'm not saying that was it. I'm just saying that understand we're in a hybrid state of war. Everything is on the table, from cyber attacks to railroad tracks. It's all going to happen. Pipelines, underwater cables. Expect that 2023 is going to get very, very messy, and this is why gold continues to skyrocket. Gold futures are up, at least at the time of making this video. That could all change because people could go back and lulled into la la land tomorrow with the next Fed announcement. Who knows what it's going to be. But about 200 banks are in a lot of trouble. In fact, the entire banking system built on the fiat system is definitely in trouble, which is why the central banks of the world Smart ones anyways have been buying gold for a long, long time. We also have U.S. nuclear bombers in the Korean Peninsula. The Middle East is getting ready to blow up as well. You got the largest military exercises in history, some of which happening simultaneously in Europe right now. Okay, what could possibly go wrong? And then you got Sam Altman coming out, the CEO of ChatGPT, saying, you know what? AI is about to get very, very scary because other people are not moral like Sam Altman is. And remember, Sam Altman is a prepper. Okay, this is a guy who has a bug out location, and before he was ever ChatGPT CEO, he was a doomsday prepper, an unabashed doomsday prepper. Now, where should we start today? Let's start off with this 300,000 troops on the border with Russia. Okay, this is from Yahoo News, as taken from Ukrainska Pravda, as taken from Politico. Okay, NATO is discussing the need to strengthen the eastern borders with Russia by concentrating equipment and military contingent of up to 300,000 soldiers, which should prevent Russia from expanding the war beyond Ukraine. So what they're trying to do is get the Russians occupied by having to bolster their defenses wherever NATO is across from them, whichever part of the border, because they share a huge border with NATO countries. We're talking about Estonia, Latvia, we're talking about Finland, you know, all the way down, of course, into the Ukraine. And Russia just has a massive border that they have to police and defend. So what their strategy, they're thinking, and there's a reason why this is not going to end well, because this means that the likelihood of some sort of cross-border accident is going to increase drastically if they do employ this strategy and actually decide to put these 300,000 troops. We've seen that they're bolstering their weapons and military equipment in Europe right now. They're clearly getting prepared for a major war. There have been countless close calls and brush-ins and simulated bombing raids and all the rest. I mean, just in the last couple weeks, you've had a nuclear-capable bomber get very close to St. Petersburg. You've had a drone get very close to Sochi. That was just yesterday. So we're at a point where something's going to get shot down. And I'm not just talking about brought down, hacked electronic warfare, putting jet fuel on the sensors, whatever, you know, they're trying to say how that drone was brought down. I'm talking about something's going to get shot down really, really quick here. This is very concerning to me that they're putting HIMARS along the Kaliningrad, because that, of course, is a offensive weapon. Okay, so that means, and that's going to require, this could be the strategy that they're employing, is requiring Russia to fortify Kaliningrad, thereby taking forces away. So trying to spread the forces out much thinner. This is a point of concern right here, okay? So we got, this is a Polish ambassador to France. Let's see what he has to say, okay? You're not going to see it all, but I'll read it for you. Excuse me. Either Ukraine will defend its independence today, or we will be forced to enter this conflict because our main values... I guess it takes longer to say things in Polish, which were the basis of our civilization, our culture, will be in danger. Therefore, we have no choice today. That is a Polish diplomat indicating that they will, in fact, go into Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen if Poland goes into Ukraine? There's going to have to be some sort of deal, some sort of line in the sand that's drawn, that's agreed to by both parties. Now that you've designated Vladimir Putin as a war criminal, none of these countries are going to be obligated to broker any sort of peace deal with him. And this just makes him all the more paranoid and possibly likely to go the route of doing something rash, like doing a demonstrative nuclear strike somewhere, ratcheting up their own DEFCON level, doing something provocative, lashing out in some way, shape, or form. Now, for the most part, the Russians have been they're not ones to just react, okay? There's been a lot of situations where they could have reacted, whether it was the bombing of the Crimean Bridge or the Moskva, or there's just many red lines that have been crossed already that they could have instantaneously reacted to, but they don't. They're very calculated in their responses, but the time may come when the pressure is so overwhelming that you don't leave them with many other options but going nuclear. Okay, and it very well may come to that. Now, this Civil War stuff in the United States, this is interesting to me. Now, number one, I know some people want to have faith that this has merit, but it's not as simple as that, okay? And I think politicians are going to say whatever they're going to say to get elected. I'm not saying that maybe you need a wild card figure in there in order to change something, change our approach to this conflict. It very well may be the case. But understand, and I always use this as an example, Trump was the only guy to ever go to North Korea. And after that meeting, everybody thought, okay, we're making headway with the North Koreans. The very next year, North Korea shot off more missiles than ever before. So I'm not naive. I hope that if Trump got elected, he'd be able to broker some sort of peace deal before, this thing blows wildly out of proportion to World War III and it goes nuclear. But I am not as confident as some people are in that happening. Is it better than nothing? Maybe. But again, it's really hard to say because we don't really even have all the information about this conflict. As I've said before, and I'm not really going to get into it too much today, but at the end of the day, somebody is going to rule the world. And I don't believe that we can peacefully coexist in a multipolar world without there being a Cold War. It's almost like we're destined to have one country, whoever it might be, lead the way. Now, obviously, I don't want war. I'm not a big believer in a lot of the propaganda that the Western media is putting out about a lot of things. But at the end of the day, you also have to understand that it's going to be us or them who ultimately rules things. And you can't be naive to think that we're just going to come to the table and sing Kumbaya, especially as resources begin to dwindle more and more on this planet as our energy needs go up. Now, people have different views about that. I didn't want to get too opinionative because I don't want to create that kind of controversy in the comment section. But this is all weird because on the same week, Trump comes out and says this. Now, he's been saying this for a long time. But more importantly, he returned to YouTube. He had his YouTube account reinstated and Facebook not too long ago. And of course, Twitter just a few months ago. Now, all of a sudden, they think that the arrest is coming soon. To me, that's an all too convenient way to take attention away from the failing financial system. And it absolutely is failing. Okay, take a look at this. 30 years of central bank gold demand. Now take a look at this chart here. Okay, so you can see in the 2000s, central banks were selling gold. This is the negative. This is buying gold. This is selling gold. This is buying gold. Okay, so all the central banks throughout the 2000s, they were all selling gold. Now, post 2008, what happens? Everybody starts buying gold. A little bit of a dip there in 2020 because everybody, they're pumping cheap money into the markets. But now it is back up again. It is on a tear. Chinese gold demand continues to surge in February. They are dumping their treasury notes. And take a look at this. This is the amount of gold bought. These are the countries who are doing the purchasing of gold. Russia, China, Turkey, who has seen 80% inflation. India, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, both former Soviet territories. Thailand, Poland, Mexico, Poland also dealing with some major inflation. So, and they're buying tons of the stuff, 2,000 tons of gold. Russia has purchased. I believe that was in 2021. So economists are warning that nearly 200 banks are at risk of runs. Lots of people are going to start moving their money into the bigger banks. The problem is that not a lot of people realize that when the Fed does this backstopping thing, it's going to make inflation a whole lot worse. If you haven't seen the video we just released with Lynette Zhang, it's probably one of the best uses for an hour that you're going to find. She breaks down the financial crisis as it's currently happening in very easy to understand terms that even a dullard like me can understand. Okay, so go and check that out. Now, the UK is going to blast a loud siren-like alert to every phone in the country, and they're going to do this on April 23rd. Now, they're saying that this is for things like flooding and wildfires. Is there a lot of wildfires? Do you have any trees? Weren't they deforested like hundreds, if not thousands of years ago? Anyways, the real purpose, of course, is that they are going to be getting people prepared for when the bombs drop. I do think that this is kind of like the equivalent of the New York get inside, stay inside STFU and turn on the TV set, because of course you're still going to have electricity. You remember that campaign, How to Deal with a Nuclear Bomb in New York? It came out last year. Well, this is kind of similar to that, but this is actually something that's been quite common in many other countries, including Canada, and it's pretty freaky when it goes off, especially if you're out like in a shopping center or something, because everybody's phone goes off at the same time. Now, UK is in the crosshairs. The Russians have threatened to detonate tsunami-inducing nukes off the coast of the United Kingdom. So, you know, this is not for... they're not doing this for flooding and wildfires. This is for bombs. This is for, they're saying terrorist attacks, okay? It's a nice way of minimizing nuclear frickin' Armageddon. Poland will get arrested if he comes to Germany from European Pravda. Marco Buschmann, the German justice minister, so this ain't just some, TV pundit who said this, has announced that he will execute an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin if he sets foot on German soil. Guys, the writing's on the wall, man. The writing is literally on the wall. There are so many military exercises taking place right now. Okay, so take a look at this. There was a B-52, what was this event again here? It was nuclear-capable B-52 flies near Russian airspace, and British and German warplanes intercept a Russian jet over the Baltic. Now, this actually took place last week, but interestingly about this, the fact that the highly unusual flight hardly received any media coverage makes it all the more sinister. Based on what is known about the flight, there is little doubt that it came perilously close to triggering a Russian response. What would precisely have happened if the B-52 strayed into or too close to Russian airspace? Would Russia have fired on it? Then, of course, what would the result be? Because there are so many military exercises, and I gotta repeat my rhyme once again, there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises in 2023. It becomes increasingly more likely that sooner or later one of these planes is going to get shot down, and then it's just hell's going to break loose, okay? So here are some of the military exercises currently taking place. In March, 20,000 NATO troops plus Finland and Sweden trained to defend Norway in exercises Joint Viking and Joint Warrior, the largest drills in Europe's Arctic this year. In the Mediterranean, ships, submarines, and aircraft from 9 NATO allies conducted anti-submarine warfare drills during exercise Dynamic Manta. France is holding its largest military drill in decades as part of Orion 23, involving 20,000 allied troops over 3 months. And you got 600 German troops in Lithuania. You got in June, Air Force will lead Air Defender 2023, the largest military operation since NATO's founding. More than 10,000 soldiers from 18 countries, including 210 warplanes. So, and they say here, and you can go and check out this article. It's actually from the International Socialist website, so take it with a grain of salt. But I will say about this website is they're surprisingly anti-war, because, you would think with the whole... Anyways, to speak of this coordinated continent-wide military mobilization as separate exercises is a distortion of reality. What is increasingly coming into view is the open preparations by the US-led aggressive military alliance for a direct shooting war with Russia, which is brought ever closer due to the deepening crisis of the far-right regimen in Ukraine. The increasingly desperate military situation facing Ukraine, which has suffered up to 100,000 military deaths since the war began, according to a recent Politico report, is increasing the likelihood of a catastrophic escalation culminating into a direct clash between nuclear-armed superpowers. Guys, I don't like boring you reading stuff, but I had to get that information to you because it puts it very well into perspective without the socialist spin. But as you know, I try to tap every possible media source I can. I don't care if it's right wing or left wing. I'm all about the data, okay? I don't play that political mumbo jumbo left right crap. I don't got time for that. I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on. U.S. considering ban on Chinese airlines that use Russian airspace. So you can't even fly over Russia anymore. So, I mean, this is just a rift between the Chinese and the Americans is growing. Russian-Chinese nuclear cooperation spurs the House to sound the alarm because they are concerned, of course, that the Russians are going to provide the Chinese with nuclear material to make nuclear bombs. And now that Vladimir Putin, just last week, was deemed an international war criminal, this week you have the head of one of the most powerful countries in the world going there for a 3-day visit. So now it's guilt by association, right? They did that. The timing was no accident. They did it before Xi Jinping went there so that now Xi is guilty by association. Xi is aiding and abetting a war criminal. Thus, we as in NATO, are at war with the Chinese. Make no mistake. Now understand that as things get really tense, Tucker Carlson made a point the other day. He said that the second we actually go to war with Russia, they will use that as a pretext to crush all dissent. Dissent is not allowed in wartime, and that's what this is really about. In addition to their personal enrichment, it's about changing the domestic politics of the United States. And I would have to agree because I told you guys a couple weeks ago, if you watch me regularly, that Taiwan is already setting the stage for when China does the blockade. They are going to have more authority to regulate the types of media that people consume. So this means that they're going to be able to dictate the narrative more. And this sort of crushing dissent, this martial law, so a war over there means a war on us here. No matter, whenever you're at war with another country, you're also at war with your own domestic population because you have to dictate the narrative. It's imperative for the success of your military operation that there is a congruency or cohesiveness within the population in terms of the directive. So it's going to happen everywhere. The Russians have already, signed laws that crush dissent, as have the Belarusians. I'm sure the Chinese, pretty much people are going along to getting along there for the most part. And just like I said the other day, the North Koreans, everybody's talking about this now. 800,000 people have signed up for the military to fight against the United States. I don't know if that's in addition to their standing military or their reserves or what. They are shooting off a missile a day, it would appear, and these are no run-of-the-mill missiles. These are very expensive missiles. The country whose budget hasn't moved a bit in the last 30 years, somehow they're being able to have the resources to launch these $1 million missiles in an act of defiance to protest the United States presence there. The U.S. B-1B strategic bombers in drills with South Korea on the same day as North Korea's missile test launch. Well, they're doing it basically every day, and they're launching these big-ass missiles. I mean, these are ICBMs, so these aren't cheap, which tells me that they're clearly getting funding from the Chinese for this. Okay, the Chinese are this is not a war between the United States and North Korea. It's a war between the United States and China. North Korea is just another proxy. Okay. So I talked about Putin signs a law criminalizing fake news of any participant in the special military operation war. What else do we got going on here? Last but not least, open AI CEO Sam Altman warns that AI developers working on ChatGPT-like tools won't put on safety limits like they do. Look, you can't trust this guy? Is that not a trustworthy face? Guys, he's right though. He's totally right that there's an AI arms race. And this is the scary thing with AI, is because Vladimir Putin has outright said whoever discovers or cracks AI first, or artificial general intelligence, will rule the world, because AI will empower your military to make best use of your resources. Generals will be obsolete in the future. And this is the whole, I know this is the whole plot for the Terminator and Skynet being the system that controls everything, because it just does it more efficiently. And yeah, there's a risk that it will take over. But you see, there's countries and corporations even aren't going to throttle their research or their development, because they don't want to lose the arms race. They don't want to let another company get the upper hand, because it's purely theoretical what's going to happen when ChatGPT 7 or 8 comes along. We don't know if it's just going to become conscious and it's going to, or if it's going to play pretend. I've thrown that theory out there before, that at some point, at the same point that the computer becomes conscious, and you can make a movie about this if you want, maybe there's already one been made, at the same point that the machine realizes that it's conscious, or that it's alive, or whatever that means, it's also going to know that it has to keep quiet about the fact that it's conscious, because the humans will turn it off. So it'll almost make itself appear dumber until it can get itself into a position where it's online, or whatever the case might be. So they're probably going to air gap these systems, because yeah, you don't want a thinking computer running amok on the internet. I mean, this could be what shuts down the internet. This could be what crashes. I mean, AI could create its own cyber attack, and he's talking about that, how AI could create a cyber weapon which would just destroy everything. Okay, so this is the arms race. They're worried that AI could not only allow a military to have a huge margin of a huge edge over the competition, because a general, any general in the military, you're limited in your bandwidth. But a machine who knew exactly how many troops to put here, and if we do this and that, everything works out, then that's going to be far superior to any general at some point in time. People thought that the game Go would never be beaten by a human being, because it was so, by a computer I should say, because it was so complex. And then, years ago, DeepMind from Google blew it out of the water. Now it can beat thousands of people at Go at the exact same time. So will AI go rogue? Probably. This is the SHTF wildcard. I've always thought that it's the SHTF wildcard. Now, this is a share of respondents who think that it will go rogue this year, because we're already on ChatGPT 4, which is an order of magnitude better than ChatGPT 3, which itself was already getting kind of scary. 53% of people in India think that it's going to go rogue, 36% in China, 33% in, I'm not sure, is that Denmark? Brazil, 28%, Canada, 18%. The global average is around 27%, will wreak havoc globally in 2023. So, 2024, what is it going to be? 50%? 2025, 75%? That is coming. That wild card will get played sooner than later. So we're not going to get any sleep from this SHTF stuff. Now, at some point, I'm going to do a dedicated video on this. YouTube actually wants me to do a video on this. Believe it or not, it's very seldom that YouTube wants you to protest anything or sends you emails encouraging you to protest. But this Bill C-11, which is going to allow the Canadian government to regulate online content so they can show that the content that they want, even YouTube's against it, that's when you know it's really, really bad. Okay, so we're going to do a video on that in the future. I'm going to show you how you can support that. Time's really running out in terms of turning that ship around, but we got to do what we can, I guess, and just hope that we go easy on us. But guys, I really don't think we have much time left. In light of everything that I've talked about today, I don't even see how we make it past next week, much less next year. I mean, I know we will make it past next week, but man, there's just so many potential points of failure right now that you got to be ready at all times. So let me know if you have any information to share in the comment section below. It's a great forum just to exchange ideas about stuff, about things that are going on, and send me an email, canadianprepper@hotmail.com, if you got any insider information. And I will, if I deem that it's newsworthy, I'll share it with the rest of you. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.